The Legion of Superheroes is a fictional superhero team appearing in American comic books. Initially, the team was closely associated with the original Superboy character and was portrayed as a group of time travelers.
This is Superman number 8, 1987. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because that YouTube commenter was like, what or where should I start? I've never read Legion of Superheroes, but I want to read the 5 years later period.
I feel like this is the biggest can of worms in Legion history. This right here, because this is where things start to unravel. That's why I kept wondering, why aren't we just doing this?
Oh, you should have said that.
I did. I thought we were talking about that.
Oh, it's just a reprint of 247. Yeah, okay.
Because then you said, well, we'll just cover the origin part. And then I'm like, well, this is just a couple pages longer.
Yeah, okay, you're right. But I think that another reason that I thought looking at this would be better is because that YouTube guy said, I don't want to read the Silver Age comic.
Oh.
And so, like, talking about this one, like, if you're a person who is, I'm not going to read a Silver Age comic book. It's too old fashioned. I'm not going to watch a black and white movie. I was born in 2010, you know, that stuff. I don't understand that. It's a different language to me. Well, maybe you could tolerate a comic by the most palatable superhero comic book creator in history, a John Byrne comic. Maybe you could get that. If you can't understand a goddamn Silver Age comic book, it's so old-fashioned. Maybe this is for you.
I gotta say, though, when you brought that question up, what's a good primer issue? I couldn't think of any. Like, they don't really do a very good job of recapping.
No, they don't.
I think Marvel makes a point to almost the point of repetitiveness, at least back then. Like, almost every issue, Peter Parker was bitten by a spider or whatever, you know, a little blurb, or there'd be a blurb in the front or a flashback or something. It's constantly being worked into the dialogue, but there aren't many instances of that except outside of Legion, like possibly that Booster Gold, definitely this. Like, the only overview I could kind of think of was in a Superman book.
Yeah, I didn't even think of this. You said this and I'm like, oh yeah, that's perfect. Because this is for like the newsstand audience. They have to tell you what's going on here because, you know, a semi-truck driver is going to be reading this. A 6-year-old is going to be reading this. They have to tell you what's happening.
And they're Superman readers. They're Superman readers too. So they're not necessarily.
Yeah. And you were telling me how this was maybe one of the first Legion comics you bought, I think. And
it was the other one. Yeah.
You never even read the conclusion or the continuation into the Baxter story for years and years.
No, I didn't.
And so, like, in the
I think Baxter that was the only Bronze Age story I read.
Yeah, the Baxter series was direct market only. Even in that, they don't have to tell you what's going on, you know, because they know the people buying that already knows what's going on. Right. The only people who go into a comic book shop already know everything, you know, so they don't need to do a recap.
Right.
But for the moms and the truck drivers and the little kids, you kind of need to tell them a little something. And also, you've got John Byrne, who I think he just kind of does that, right? Like,
yes,
you kind of know what's going on in a John Byrne comic, no matter what.
Yeah, he loves doing recaps.
Yeah, he likes to trace those panels. It just fills it out, right?
Well, he likes to do that, and then he likes to massage the story ever so slightly, and he asserts his opinions on how comics should be within the recaps. Like, he will sometimes reframe them ever so slightly. So it's why his version of the history is better than the other guys.
So, like, when you see in, like, the I guess the New Gods or something, when he does a flashback and retells the Kirby story. Visually, it just looks like a John Byrne redraw of a Kirby page, but it's more than that. It's like when John Byrne was a kid and read this,
right?
He's putting his interpretation of that page into his version of that page when he draws it. Revisionist recontextualization of the Kirby stuff.
Yeah, there's a little revisionism.
Or of in this, it's pretty true.
He's more reverent to Kirby than others, but he does it with Kirby too, which is funny that he's so reverent to him because he sold him out pretty badly. like during those when Kirby was in court with Marvel.
Oh yeah, he falls very much on the work for hire and sticking to it, right?
Right,
But even
right,
it's his position is kind of even different from Ditko's
right.
position. Like it's the same position. Ditko's like, yeah, I knew I was selling all this stuff. It's fine.
Hmm.
Byrne is more like, you do this work because you love the company and
Hmm.
you're going to sell them everything because you love them. Like he likes to be a cog in the machine. While
Right.
Ditko is like, this was the contract I signed and I'm just going to stick to it. You have to honor your contracts. That's maybe more the Ditko stance, while the Byrne stance,
Right.
while it adds up to the same thing as Ditko, Byrne is like, love your boss, be a
Mhm.
boss, aspire to be the boss
Right.
or something. Yeah, I don't know. Even though Byrne is like the beneficiary of big comic book contracts and deals.
Big time. Big time. Ditko's weird though. Like you're absolutely right about him, but at the same time, like he did not like Stan fucking with his stories, and that's part of the reason he ended up quitting. Like he's bitter, even though he sticks to those principles. It did feel like he had a chip on his shoulder for the way he was treated
Hmm.
by Marvel, and I don't know what he expected. More control. Maybe he thought Marvel should sell the character to him. I don't know. It's almost at odds with his objectivist philosophy, but he really hated when. I mean, I think it was even open back in the '60s. Like Ditko was writing it
Yeah. Well, I mean,
by
you
the
could.
end.
I don't know a ton about the details of the objectivist
Hmm.
ideology, but I think if you're a guy like Ditko and you get hired to sell your labor and your work and you put your whole self into it,
Hmm.
then it shouldn't be changed. It's set in
Right.
stone. And then to have
Right.
somebody else who's like probably a lesser talent come and change it
Right.
all and
Right. Right.
whatever, then yeah, you can be upset about that. But then
Hmm.
also still like, well, they paid me and that was what I signed off on.
Right.
If I didn't like it, I won't do it again or something like that. Maybe that's what he feels like. If I didn't like the experience, I can say no because it's a free market
I
system.
just love that they found scraps of this puts Ivan to shame. Like scraps of like early Amazing Spider-Man originals that he just used as cutting boards over the years.
I didn't hear that about him. I heard that about Toth.
Oh yeah.
I heard something about like some originals that Toth got returned to him and he didn't like the work
Hmm.
and he like it just like was in the trunk of his car and he's putting like the dirty spare tire all on top of these artwork on these original art,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know.
Right.
But then yeah, also the cutting board type of stuff. Pretty crazy these guys.
It almost seems like you're sending a message with that because it's like that was like 50 years ago. You still got like scraps of that in your workshop.
Yeah, there's some messed up psychology there, right? You know,
Right.
like, oh, you hate it so bad? Why do you still have it? You know?
Hmm.
I mean, I guess just to cut into it with your knife. I guess that makes sense. It's
Right.
very I don't know, is that Freudian? It's like textbook killing your mother or whatever, you know? But in this comic book, this is Superman number 8, 1987. I think it's entirely drawn by John Byrne or entirely produced by John Byrne.
Is it
With
Carl Kessel?
Carl Kessel is the inker on this one.
Hmm. Tom Zuko's the how do you say his name? Zuko?
I think you say Zuko. I think is how you say that
Zuko
dude's name.
is the colorist. John Costanza, the letterist. Mike Carlin is the editor. Dedicated to the memory of Edmund Hamilton.
We're undoing some ideas of Edmund Hamilton in this story.
Right.
No, this is actually it's actually kind of told like an Edmund Hamilton story in a way, I
Hmm.
guess. This issue and the corresponding action issue, Action 591.
Hmm.
I think this is the first time in the new rebooted Superman that John Byrne did. First time the Legion of Superheroes shows up.
Right. We are at last addressing the Superboy conundrum.
Right. Yes. The John Byrne has there's no Superboy. Clark Kent grows up as a typical normal American boy and only becomes Superman once he moves to Metropolis as an adult at age 26 or whatever.
Right. It's not a wholly new idea. Like in the beginning, there was no Superboy. That was added later, like around 1945 in his own series. And even then, sometimes they would acknowledge he was Superboy as a kid. Other times they kind of ignored that. Like the George Reeves show, he was never Superboy. In the Superman movie, he was never Superboy. Especially for other media, it complicates the origin story. So I think they were probably thinking of getting rid of Superboy for a long time.
Right. Yeah, I think Superboy as a concept was something that happened like at the height of super mania or something. They're like, well, how do we get more Superman product out there? Well, we'll tell a story of when he was a kid. We'll tell a story of when he was a baby. And they didn't have the concept of whatever they have now, multiple dimensions or Earth 2 or Elseworlds. They didn't do that shit back then. It was just like, well, we'll fit it in. It was always kind of Superboy had his own title in Superboy and in Adventure Comics, and kind of never the twain shall meet between Superman and Superboy. And so you could almost easily cast off all the Superboy stuff if you wanted and look at it as I do. I don't think of Superboy as Superman as a boy. I think of him as a totally different guy. If not, Superman is Superboy as an adult. That's kind of how I think of it, because I never read Superman. I read Legion Superheroes mostly.
It was around for so long. It developed it had its own supporting cast, its own recurring villains. And much of it was very separate from Superman until John Byrne actually came around. Even though he erased Superman or Superboy, he brought in a lot of, I don't know that, I could be wrong about Lana. Lana might have shown up a little bit before, but he started integrating a lot of the Smallville stuff into the proper Superman book. And of course, he brought the parents back, who were a constant supporting cast in the Superboy. So he kind of cherry picked the things he liked about Superboy, pulled it into Superman, and then cut Superboy out.
I'm trying to think how we can tie this back into why this should be your first Legion superhero comic.
It shouldn't.
But yeah, this exists in a world where there's no Superboy, or no Superboy. And hold on a second, my cat got stuck in here.
So around 1985, 1986, Marv Wolfman and George Perez did a 12-issue maxi series called Crisis of Infinite Earths. Within this series, they decided to consolidate all the various Earths, the multiverse, into one coherent universe. However, there were some odds and ends, some inconsistencies that did not fit in this new shared world. Superboy was one of them.
I carry a badge.
Dun, 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 dun. And because there was no longer multiple Earths, there was no way of explaining Superboy away. You couldn't just say he's from the Silver Age Earth, which is what they could have done even 2 years earlier. It was kind of bad luck that Byrne had decided to pull this character out right after they'd gotten rid of all these ways to explain his existence. The worst part of this, though, is even if you don't like Superboy or feel he's expendable, the entire Legion of Superheroes mythos is built from Superboy. So it's like ripping the foundation out and trying to hope the building still stands.
But what if there was a comic book that was Legion Superheroes that had no Superboy, and you wanted to read the first issue of that? This comic book, because of its very mainstream availability and because it's showing the appearance of Legion Superheroes, which is not a mainstream title really, it's kind of a niche title among DC stuff.
I guess
they have to explain who these guys are, and I think it's good for that because, from the cover, it's kind of a good representation of the Legion of Superhero team. You got some aliens, some different looking characters, different variety of powers. There's a strong guy, there's a smart guy, there's a fire guy, there's an invisible guy.
Yeah. A Fantastic Four almost.
Yeah. This is a very famous John Byrne ripoff of his own Fantastic Four cover.
Mm-hmm.
In any other titles or in any other media, when they show you the Legion of Superheroes, there's always, maybe it's like the three original Legionnaires as representatives, or there's like these very broad alien looking characters as the kind of iconic representative to show you just what it's like when you have a team of 30th century teen superheroes. And there's going to be a green guy, there's going to be maybe a girl who's blue with a cape, there's going to be a rock guy, things like that, you know. They don't show you the most boring ones who is just different white dudes in tights. They have kind of a variety of foreign alien looking ones.
Right. We have white dudes who can get really big. We have white dudes that can turn invisible.
Right.
We have white dudes that can only use one power at a time.
But so, by way of explaining who these guys are guest starring in this issue of Superman and then later Action Comics, John Byrne, superstar, superhero cartoonist of the 80s, gives us a little recap of the first appearance of the Legion of Superheroes from Adventure Comics 247. Like if you're incapable, for example, of reading an old comic book, you don't want to read that, you can read one of these. This is a very modern way of telling a comic book story. It's still a flashback. I don't know if they still do flashbacks in comics or not, but they do it in movies. You'll understand that.
I think they just tell stories non-linearly now, right? There's leaps back.
Yeah, they just put the date and the city and maybe the hour and minute that is occurring at the top of the page. Anyway, in this issue, John Byrne kind of recaps the events of the first appearance of the Legion of Superheroes, gives you an overview of the concept of these characters, and shows you more than, like, if you were just to pick up Adventure Comics 247, their first appearance, you don't know anything about the concept. You know the original three Legionnaires, but even that was never meant to be anything more than that story. It's kind of a one-off, right? But see, in this, John Byrne recaps a lot of different concepts from the Legion comic. The first meeting between Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, the time travel aspect, what their headquarters looked like, that they are based in Metropolis. And then it shows sort of a picture of the current batch of Legion of Superheroes characters. And I think when you pointed out to me that this is a good starting point, I think you're right. I think you could start here and you could get a really good basic primer of the concept if you didn't know anything about them.
Maybe. Yeah. I'm starting to wonder, did the Legion even have a concept before Zero Hour? I mean, all he's doing right here is he's recapping the first issue. And then he says a whole bunch of other people joined. And then they fought, the Fatal Five and the Time Trapper. But he doesn't really explain what they are. By the time you get to Archie Legion, I think it's clear that they're kind of like, well, I don't know, like they're like ambassadors, right, for every planet.
Yeah.
Surely that's talked about before, right? When R.J. Brand is putting the group together.
I don't know if that it is really. I mean, I think that I don't know if it's limited to one hero per planet in the United Planets, or if it's just specifically no duplication of powers. But yeah, you're right. They later become, it's like a United Nations or something of superheroes.
I mean, I don't know when that first came in, but it makes sense. Like it seems obvious. Like that's probably what it always should have been if they were ever going to explain what it is, right? Why else would they?
Yeah, I mean, just by aggregation of all these different concepts over the years, like they begin as just this trio of kids.
Right.
And I think they say like, oh, there's more of us. Maybe you'll meet them later.
Right.
In Adventure 247. And then later it's revealed that like they're financed by a rich guy. Mm-hmm. And later they can only have, no duplication of powers.
Right.
like on and on this buildup of shit over 20 years.
But I mean, it makes sense. It's like the Olympics. It's almost like a publicity thing for goodwill amongst the planets. We get the best young heroes of each world, and they're all together.
Yeah, they definitely Mark Waid definitely exploits that kind of idea too by in the reboot thing,
Right.
by having them not like each other and stuff like that.
Right.
Like you're only here because you have to be here because your planet sent you and stuff like that. I think
Right.
that's sort of an issue in some of them.
Makes sense.
Whereas the original concept is that in the future, instead of just being one superhero like here in Smallville, in the future, 1,000 years from now, there's so many superheroes that we have a little club and we all hang out together, and we're all teenage superheroes. That's the concept.
Right.
And in this, he explains that concept. He explains how it all got started, and then he shows you a picture of all of them as they are at this point in history.
I don't think Mark Waid came up with that whole cloth at all. I mean, maybe he connected the dots more definitively, but even like like Marla was the adult advisor, for example, before Wade came along, and he was helping. There were people applying before. There was a Legion Academy before. There was, I don't know, like it seems like I don't know what the hell I'm saying, David. I just don't want to give Mark Wade all the credit. I guess I don't want to credit anything post Zero Hour because I refuse to admit any of that exists.
I mean, I think those guys did a decent job of streamlining all this stuff and having it all be kind of cohesive in a way, even though it didn't really need it. It was just fine the way it was.
I almost wonder, would the best Legion, this is going to be sacrilege coming from me, but would those first couple like Wade issues be the best primer for before you go back? Because it is a streamlined version of the origin.
Yeah, almost. Like it's, well, because it doesn't take into account the story as it continued from the story of the three superpowered teenagers save the life of a rich guy and it gets the ball rolling.
Like it has that.
Well, but in issue 0 of Legion of Superheroes or whatever, like it doesn't tell you what happens after that because they're going to tell us that as the story continues.
Right.
After 0 Hour. This one, it doesn't tell you much, but it shows you what they looked like in their first appearance in Adventure 247, and then it shows you what's going on right now to a degree. Like it shows you this drawing, and then it gives you an adventure of these four guys and Superman. Like this is the current version of Legion of Superheroes, kind of, and this is the old version, the original version with Cosmic Boy and the funny suit, for example. And it gives you the notion that there's this lineage, like it's been going on a while, this rotating lineup, et cetera, which you wouldn't get from the 0 Hour reboot first issue, Legion of Superheroes number 0. I don't think you would get it. You wouldn't quite get the full picture that there's this span of time from when they first appeared until when we're reading like this comic or reading a first issue of Legion of Superheroes in 1989 or something like that.
And what about the secret history?
Totally irrelevant. You don't need to read that ever. Nobody needs to read that. Secrets of the Legion. Yeah, total. Like that I think is meant to be something where you start. It's so bad. It's not even a good comic. Like I wouldn't recommend anyone read that. Like,
yeah, that's the problem with it.
Read this book. It's one comic book. It's in the dollar bin. It gives you an idea. Like, because like the person who asked this question, like, what do I read before I read 5 years later so I can understand it without reading any Silver Age comics? That's a tall order.
This better not have been Rob Ullman who asked this question.
I don't think so. It does sound like a prank, but I don't think it was him. This guy, like, should I make a whole video addressing this one guy's question? This lucky guy gets a whole video from us about it. But he's bought the 2 5 years later omnibuses. He's into Legion for $300, but he doesn't know where to start. My first instinct was to be like, well, just start on page 1 and read that, you know? You'll be fine. How stupid could you possibly be to not understand a comic book? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I read, a few of the Silver Age stories beforehand, and I guess I read this too. But mostly, for the most part, I was figuring it out as I went.
Right. You don't need to know too much, I think. You don't need to know too much to understand it.
Right.
And like, this is the minimum amount of information you need is right in here, you know?
If you have the old comic book nerd mindset, which I don't know if Wikipedia savvy comic nerds have this impulse or not, that you kind of enjoy trying to decode what you're reading. Like, it makes you want to go buy another issue to figure out what happened, or read a who's who or something. If you enjoy researching stuff to figure it out, I mean, the clues are all in there. It's written well enough by the beer bombs that I do think a new reader, I think it is accessible to a new reader, but they can't be a casual reader. They have to be someone willing to put some work into it. But I mean, like I said, maybe things have changed a lot. I don't know how old this person is, but I would guess that is still how comic book geeks are. Like, they enjoy that aspect of comics, having the learning part of it, the challenge, the research.
Right. Like the thrill of discovery, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know where this person's coming from that he would. I know it's a he because YouTube has told me that 100% of our subscribers are males. But yeah, I don't totally know where this person is coming from. Like, if you're afraid to read a comic book, you've already spent $300 on books, and you're like, if I open this and I read page 1, I'm going to be so confused. I won't know what to do about it. I need to read something else first.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's 6 pages that'll probably tell you about all you could need to know. The very basic, you know? But like, yeah, why would I suggest to you that you read, like, okay, you got these 2 big ass books that have about, what is it? Those 2 omnibuses combined, it's like 40 issues of comic books or more.
60, 78, like 80.
Oh yeah, it goes up to the end of to the 0 hour thing, right? Yeah.
So you got those 60 plus the Legionnaires issues.
Right. There's like 80 comic books in these 2 books. And you're like, well, what do I need to read to understand these 80 comic books? And well, I guess you need to read 920 comic books that came before it. You ready? So you can read the whole 1,000. There's a whole 1,000 of them. So there's 920 that you need to read before you read these ones that you paid $300 for. How does that feel?
Wait a minute.
Then
1,000? Like, are you counting the Cosmic Boy series there?
Yeah, it's just an eyeball. I'm just kidding
around. Oh, okay. That was more like 1,004.
Probably so. But if you're uncomfortable, like, why did you buy $300 worth of comic books that you feel unprepared to read?
That's right. Berate.
I'm so pissed at this guy.
What do you want from us?
Here, I'm giving you all you need. Read this 1 issue of Superman.
We need to show up at his door.
Here, you know what this guy's name is? This guy is Colossal Boy. His name's Jim Allen. Okay, you got that? This guy is Superboy. His name is Kal-El. He's from Krypton. You heard of Superman? He's Superman as a boy. Okay? This is Tyrock. His name is Troy. I don't know. He's from
Tyrone.
He's from
the future.
Yeah, he's from the future. This is Ultra Boy. He can only use 1 power at a time. His name's Joe Nye. He got his powers from eating
being eaten by a whale. It's biblical.
Yeah. But he got his powers from irradiated ambergris in the bowels of a whale.
He has a rat tail later.
This is Block. He's a rock. This Chameleon Boy. He's a chameleon. This is Timberwolf. He's a lone wolf type of character. Well, you don't need to know anything else. Come on, they're superheroes. Just read issue number 1. It came out in 1989. It's this primitive comic book from 35 years ago. You'll be just fine.
Maybe we'll go to his house and explain it to him.
Like, sit down.
You know, I read this to my son this evening.
Yeah, and did he have like a very clear understanding of the Legion of Superhero concept by the end?
He did. Well, he was pretty angered by the end. He's like, "What?" Because Superboy shows up and he wants to know what happens next. We didn't have time. He's like, "I don't understand how Superboy and Superman are a separate guy." But he named 2/3 of these guys. I haven't read him a Legion comic in quite a while, but he remembered almost. I mean, he didn't know who poor Tyrock was, unfortunately. But I think he likes Block the best, which I can kind of get. I thought he was cool when I was a kid. From this issue, the only issue I'd ever seen him in.
I kind of like his costume. I like the way he looks. And like, if you haven't ever read an issue, you don't know that he's stupid or naive or whatever he's always characterized as. He just could be a big, strong, rocky guy like the Thing or something. Yeah, it could be cool.
But it's good to have a dumb shit on the team, because then the rest of the guys can explain, who the coons are, or what the rules are in the Legion handbook. And
yeah, that's kind of like us, right? Like, so your son, how old is he? He's 10, right?
6.
He's 6. All right. And he knows 2/3 of these guys, huh?
Yeah.
So let's say you're 45 years old. It'd be very simple to grok the concept of the Legion of Superheroes. And then,
is that a Legion word? Like
I grok Spock. You remember that?
No.
Oh,
is
really?
it a book? Is that on a mug?
I think it's on a T-shirt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just means understand.
Oh, okay.
GROK.
Let's finish it.
That's the comic that I think that both of us think you should read if you want to understand the Legion of Superheroes. This is the perfect first Legion of Superhero comic book. Superman number 8.
Good luck. Wikipedia.
Get out of here. Sick of you.